Welcome back, everyone. Today's game is going to teach you about the isolated queen's pawn. Before starting, you can pause to guess what white played in this position. The answer will be given later in this video, but without further ado. Mikhail Botvinnik has the white pieces against Andrey Batuev, and the game begins with d4, d5, and c4, the queen's gambit. e6, the queen's gambit declined, and then knight c3. Knight f6 from black supporting the center, and then bishop g5 pinning the knight and threatening to take on d5. Black blocks the pin with bishop e7, and white follows up with e3, opening up the bishop. Castles from black and knight f3, developing the knight. Knight bd7 from black, and white responds with bishop d3, developing the bishop and preparing to castle. Only now does black take on c4, forcing white to waste a tempo. Instead of taking on c4 in this position, black waits for white to waste a move with bishop d3, and then takes, forcing the bishop to move again. c5 from black, striking at the white center, and white castles the king. Here black decides to transform the pawn structure into an IQP, or isolated queen's pawn. We say the d-pawn is isolated because it has no neighbors. White's ideas are to use the files and diagonals around the isolated pawn for his piece activity. He will then use this piece activity for a future attack. Another idea is to try and play d5, getting rid of the isolated pawn and opening the position for white's more active pieces. So because of the isolated pawn, white has the space advantage and has attacking advantages, but black also has advantages. The isolated pawn will be a weakness in endgames as it can't be defended by other pawns. Therefore, black's plans should involve trading pieces and heading for an endgame. Black should also aim to blockade the isolated pawn with a knight. A knight blockading is usually very strong as there are no pawns to kick out the knight. Black immediately implements this plan with knight b6 attacking the bishop and controlling d5, bishop b3, and knight d5. As you can see, the knight sits strongly in the center, and there are no pawns that can kick out the knight. But white can also get his own strong knight with knight e5. A common move in these positions, taking advantage of the extra space provided by the IQP. Black now plays knight d7, trying to trade pieces. The advantage of this move is that black trades pieces, but the disadvantage for black is that he gets rid of his good bishop and leaves himself with a slightly bad bishop. Bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, and queen e2. White is setting up the nasty idea of playing knight takes f7, and after rook takes, queen takes e6, where white ties up all of black's pieces and will win his material back. Black avoids this with knight f6, opening up the bishop's defense of e6. Rook d1 from white, centralizing the rook and defending the d4 pawn. b6 from black, preparing bishop b7 with further control of d5. It's instructive how black does everything to avoid the advance of the d-pawn and the opening of the position. Rook c1 taking the open file, and bishop b7 from black. Black now has enough control of d5 to jump a minor piece, there blockading the pawn. f3 from white. An important move, controlling the e4 square and supporting a future knight e4. If you were black, what would you play here? We've spoken about black's plans being putting a piece on d5 to blockade the pawn. So, if you would move a knight to d5 to blockade the pawn, then well done. You found the correct idea. But in the game, black played rook c8, a terrible mistake. This is the position from the start of the video, and you can pause if you haven't or want to try again to find the best move for white in this position. In this position, white played the brilliant knight takes f7. Black takes with the rook, and now queen takes e6, building the pressure against the rook and forcing black to defend passively. Queen f8, and now knight e4. We can see the idea behind f3, making this knight move possible by supporting the knight. Rook takes c1. Rook takes c1, and now knight d5, trying to blockade. But now it's too late because white's main idea of starting an attack is already successful. Botvinnik now plays knight d6, forking the bishop and the rook. Bishop a8, and then rook e1. Black can't move anything, so there is no rush taking back the rook. White makes sure that when he does cash in, he ends up with material advantage. There's now too much pressure on the black position, and all the pieces are tied together. Black plays g6, and white ends with a lovely combination beginning with knight takes f7, queen takes f7 and queen takes e8, and black resigned in this position. The idea is if queen takes, then rook takes, and black can't recapture due to the pin, and white is up material. And if knight takes, the rook takes e7, and the black queen is still pinned. Black does have bishop d5, but after all the exchanges, white ends up with 2 extra pawns and a winning king and pawn endgame. I hope you learned something about the isolated queen's pawn and the plans associated with this pawn structure. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like and subscribe button and then keep improving your chess. Now, go promote some pawns.